Good evening. Welcome to Arts and Letters. I am Jenna Gordon, host of Arts and Letters, and we are sponsored by Art Presence Art Center in Jacksonville. My guests tonight are the Applegate poets. And to best introduce you to the wonder of the Applegate poets, I couldn't have written any of this better myself. So I'm just going to read you, Diana Coogle, one of the poets, has written a beautiful foreword for the book, and I have divided it into 7 sections. I will read a section before each poet, and I will also read each poet's statement that begins at their section of the book. Diana Coogle happens to be first. She couldn't be with us tonight. She is on her way to her own adventure. And so she is with us by video, and I will show that to you in just a moment. But first, this first part of the foreword to Penned Up, Writing Out the Pandemic, which I think is one of the best titles of a book ever in the history of book titles. March 2020, a pestilence is on the land. Southern Oregon, like the rest of the country, is shut down. Restaurants and cafes have closed. The Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland has closed. The Brit Festival, our summer concert series in nearby Jacksonville, has closed. Businesses have closed. Homes are suddenly too small for both Zoom meetings and online school classes. Bread making becomes a new hobby. The Applegate poets are hunkered down. We no longer meet monthly to read and discuss our poems as we have done since 2015, when Joan Peterson, at the suggestion of Lawson Inada, Oregon Poet Laureate 2016, brought our group together. Without the stimulation of monthly meetings, my poetry was sagging. Maybe that was true of other Applegate poets too. Were Joan, Lisa, Beate, Aódagaín, Christin, and the others in our group still writing? I didn't know. That flow of exchange had been dammed by the pestilence. Lisa Baldwin breached the dam. She sent us an email at the end of March, suggesting we write a poem a day in April in recognition of National Poetry Month. She would send us daily prompts by email, and we would email our responses, reply all, each day. 5 of us, plus Lisa, enthusiastically accepted the challenge. Here was a way to be productive while life was on hold. Penned up in our homes, we would take up our pens and write poems. The creative flow was exciting, a stimulus in dull days, a way to answer and address the sadness in the world around us. It was a way to sing our songs to each other. We looked forward to the daily prompt and the responses it engendered. How would Joan interpret a prompt to write about Paul Revere's ride? What family story would Aódagaín tell? Then April came to an end, and the poem a day came to an end. But the pandemic was not at an end. Still ensconced in our homes, we missed our daily exchange of poetry and the intimacy we had experienced through that sharing. We wanted to continue, but maybe not at that pace. Not a poem a day, maybe. But Aódagaín suggested a poem a week with a different person each week giving the prompt. And so, week by week, the prompts came in. Some challenged us to write in a form, a sonnet, a golden shovel, a ciseaux, a pantoum. Some suggested a topic, a journey, a dream, role models, a hike. Some were specific, write in response to Annie Dillard's essay, Living Like Weasels. Write a poem to put in a bottle and cast on the sea. We were asked to write a recipe for something, to write a poem using 12 or 30 given words, to write in response to a painting or to a piece of music. Some prompts responded to the season, others to current events. Each week brought a new challenge to our creative imaginations. And so to our first poet, Diana Coogle, who is with us on video tonight, and here is her statement from her section in Penned Up. 2020, that year of grief and difficulty around the world, brought a crushing personal grief to me as well by my husband's unexpected death from cancer. In the interstices of caring and loving, I scrambled each day through the April of his dying to keep my commitment to a poem a day. Was the poetry keeping me sane during that insane time? Or was it simply another part of that insane time? Writing through the pandemic, writing through the fires, writing through the agony of my husband's death and the hollow days and nights and weeks that followed. After the poem a day of April, after Mike's death on May 6th, after the driving necessity of writing from such deep emotion, the Applegate poet's prompts gradually brought a return to an equilibrium of emotions, when I could look at other topics, pay attention to the world around me, take solace and delight in nature, find humor in life, and let the reality of my husband's death steal more softly into my poetry. The selections here hint at that movement from the agony of April 2020 to a renewed life by the time April 2021 came to an end.
So the first poem that I will read is to T.S. Eliot on the first day of April 2020. And I read this because I think it's good for us to remember April 2020. And this poem includes some quotes from Eliot's poem, The Journey of the Magi. And you'll be able to know when I quote from that poem because those quotes are in italics on the poem that you can see on the screen. So this is to T.S. Eliot on the first day of April 2020. You're darn tootin', Mr. Eliot, that April is the cruelest month. This year, certainly, when fear is in every handful of dust, and we latch onto the word of every Madame Sosistris, whose clairvoyance shows crowds of people walking round in a ring, eating in restaurants, enjoying theater, playing music in the same room where we can hear each other without headphones, pleasures we miss this April. When we say, washing our hands, donning our masks, waving to each other from a 6-foot distance. One must be so careful these days when the unreal city is every city with its ghost streets and its silences, which in those unreal cities in Europe are broken every Wednesday night with applause from balconies for nurses and doctors, for grocery store clerks, postal carriers, and gas station attendants. None of us had thought death would undo so many. Our nerves are bad at night, frazzled from hours in front of the computer, reading books online, playing games, efforts to keep the kids occupied. Our bodies ache for a walk in the parks that are closed. The rubber band of our psyches stretches thin as April stretches before us, cruel in its unwillingness to promise a date when we can leave behind the withered stumps of time told upon the walls of our homes in which we shelter, longing to know when we can emerge with the lilacs out of the dead land and regain spring in our step. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. The next poem I'll read is called If for a Moment I Could Become, and this is a poem for John Muir. If for a moment I could become the root that loves the rain, maybe I would water my garden more carefully. If I could become the blossom that loves the bee, the nut that loves the bird, the dirt that loves the worm, maybe I would love more assiduously my garden soil. If I could become the air that sings to the hummingbird's wing and swings the spider's thread like a hammock, I know I would try harder at my pranayama. If I could become the rainbow that arcs like a mother's arm when the sun drops a kiss on the rain's new face, I would more often drop colors on the black days of others. If for a moment I could become the wave that carries the whale's song, the silence that crackles when the frost goes hard, the dark that lights the Milky Way's path, maybe then I would know at last that I am not picked out by myself, but am hitched by deep nerve patterns to everything else in the universe. And finally, I'll read the poem called Ode to a Winter Landscape. And if you are familiar with Gerard Manley Hopkins' poems, you might recognize allusions to 6 different Hopkins poems in this poem. And this is because I love winter, that's why I wrote this poem, and I also love Hopkins. This is Ode to a Winter Landscape. Nothing is so beautiful as a winter landscape when firefolks of frost in the frozen fields wink rainbows at the morning sun, when the unity of white undoes dappled things, when the squeak of skis on snow sneaks into the unity of silence in the snow-muffled forest, when the air is so cold it hurts your teeth to smile, but you can't stop smiling because nothing is so beautiful as snow-laden fir boughs against the cobalt sky, the descending blue rushing towards whipped cream peaks. Nothing is so beautiful as the kiss of snowflakes, whisper soft from steel-gray clouds. Nothing more magical than the inaudible fall of snow outside the window, descending like down from overstuffed clouds, as the fire in the stove at your back shines like shook foil. Nothing is so beautiful as winter stars splintering in the cold air of a landscape which, winter scene, sweet, especial winter scene, is charged with grandeur and gathers to a greatness of insuperable cold, unsurpassable silence, unconditional beauty. Thank you.
Thank you to Diana. Late summer brought more challenges of a different kind. As if the pandemic weren't enough, wildfires swept through our communities and mountain forests. The Alameda fire destroyed many homes and communities close to the Applegate, and fires deeper in the mountains threatened some of our homes. Smoke descended over the valley, shutting us all indoors even more tightly than the pandemic had done, and casting a pall over already burdened spirits. Add to those 2 traumas the tension of the 2020 presidential election, and you have a perfect storm of anxiety, despair, and despondency. But as the days and months of the Annus Horribilis wore on, the Applegate poets continued to find in our shared poetry both solace and inspiration, voiced from time to time in an email. Lisa, this poetry potlatch we have going is the most nourishing, soul-sustaining gathering I can imagine in this lockdown, isolating world we are in. Aódagaín, in this time of such upheaval, fear, and sorrow, I am so, so grateful that I have you all as a circle of friends. Your beautiful words uplift and inspire. Beate, I draw hope from all our poems. They help me cope. Joan, thank you everyone for your extremely inspiring poems. Christin, this was a really difficult week for me, and your poems did so much to rebalance me. On the eve of the new year, as we looked into the future, we could see brightness ahead. Communities were rebuilding after the fires. The COVID vaccine was on its way. It wouldn't be long, we thought, before we could meet in person, masked, outdoors, socially distanced. Finally, in March 2021, we met at a winery on the Applegate River to enjoy a glass of wine and share our poems on the shores of the river. A new member, Seth, was with us. And now to Lisa. Poet's statement. 14 months of isolation necessitated by the COVID-19 pandemic might have killed me as a poet, were it not for the salvation found in our online group. In my view, the work of a poet is to recognize poetry in the physical, living world and translate that experience into a common language. A poem conveys understanding more than knowledge, perspective more than depiction, and it seems to me that such work is impossible in isolation. Impossible to know the common language of my solitary experience without some communion with others. Understanding and perspective are easily twisted and refracted in the echo chamber created by months of imposed isolation. In selecting the poems to include in this anthology, I was struck by how often I had written about time, the passage of time, both swift and slow, the impact of time on hope and patience and despair, the presence of time, at once overbearing and obscure. Each of the 10 poems presented here touches on some aspect of time, whether directly or indirectly. Time is the thread holding this section together.
Thank you, Jenna, and thanks to everyone for joining us. It is true, all the poems that I chose to include in my section of Penned Up make some reference to the passage of time. I confess I might have been a little bit obsessed with time during the pandemic lockdown. This first poem that I'm going to read is right along that vein. It's called The Permanence of Change. The best of seasons is the change, the moving on to whatever is next. Transition keeps us glad. We move on from what we've had and relish that which comes. The space between is breathing room. For anything that lingers, lingers far too long. It makes us weary, makes us lose our eyes, so we walk past a crowd of columbine or miss the fir's bright growth. We love most the new arrival coming round 4 times each year, sometimes earlier than expected, sometimes fashionably late, but always welcomed with cheer. Nothing in nature stays the same. The status quo cannot remain. Mountain to rock, to gravel, to sand, bud to blossom, to apple, desire to child, to man, to dust. The earth revolves and all evolves. The only permanence is change. This next poem is a fun form, actually the blending of 2 forms. It's an acrostic golden shovel. I use the title of my poem as the acrostic piece, and the golden shovel element is from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, his first 4 lines. It's called Will Life Return in Spring? We cast our weary, cloudy eyes toward April in hopes that the life we once knew is like the irrepressible cycle of greening renewal, the long endured misery nurtured by the cruelest lack of human decency ends. In the blooming month, in the crux of spring, sparrows madly breeding, fledglings in sparse feathers fall among the lilacs. Evergreen hope is not nearly enough. Our way out runs in snaking curves against eroding banks of easily swollen, flashy creeks and the turmoil of historic floods. Here, our winter dead, uncounted, unmourned, foul the awakened land, rank in hastily backhoed graves. Death is mixing now with the burgeoning life of April, and memory is scattered like seed saved for yesterday and never. Be quick to love the ones that you desire. Sing full-throated and give voice to stirring poetry. Lift up your eyes, no matter how dull. Rise, rise, though grounded by quarantined roots. Into tomorrow we survivors all go, armed with natural prayers, and give anxious welcome to spring. Give thanks to be washed in a warm April rain. Okay, one more poem from me. In this one, I imagined a future historical reflection on our pandemic experience with COVID-19 and the climate crisis. It's called From the Historical Record. The first century of the Pleistocene age was marked by extreme environmental degradation and climate change, due primarily to the excesses of human activity and greed. The warmer, wetter climate fostered the evolution of many new bacterium and viruses spread by unwitting and witless humans Some caused the first mass die-off of humans starting in 2020. See also COVID-19. The historic pandemic coincided with global unrest and an unprecedented failure of humanity. For a time, there was a healing pause, and the people withdrew. The people stepped back. Owls and lions came out in the daylight. Deer sauntered like tourists around silent Times Square. For a time, there was a cleansing pause, and the skies were blue again. Has it always been more beautiful after nightfall? Even now, a few stars unfade to shine. For a time, there was a material pause. For a time, the people stopped. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Beate. And for Beate, we're going to read numbers this section, April. We get to April 2021. Oregon is beginning to open up. The restrictions of the pandemic have lifted. The Oregon Shakespeare Festival has announced a live performance in the outdoor theater later in the summer. People are flocking to cafes, sitting outdoors in restaurants. People are getting vaccinated. Gradually, the pandemic is losing its fight. Life is returning to what it used to be, though with the difference of the pandemic scars and its still hovering, though diminished presence. It's National Poetry Month again, and again Lisa challenges us to write a poem a day. Again, we are penning poetry like mad. This April, our spirits, like our domestic lives, are feeling freer again. Beate?
Good afternoon. Welcome to this reading. I hope you will enjoy our book. The first poem is a pontoon. It's written in one of the forms. And spring restoration. The big garden awaits. 2 apple trees in full bloom, and in between a wilderness, a microcosmos that lives between the weeds. 2 apple trees in full soft pink bloom. They were pruned not too long ago. A wild microcosmos covered by weeds will disappear when the soil is tilled. The strong branches will bear fruit, while ants, snails, beetles, spiders will disappear when the beds are tilled, for the fallow soil is ready now. Ants, snails, beetles, spiders. There's a wilderness in between seasons. The fallow soil is ready now, and the big garden awaits. My next poem is a combination. It's a Corona haiku, which my fellow poet Lisa created, and I hope you will enjoy it as well. Mirrored by the river. Early morning walk, sweet blackberries melt on tongue, sun rising up red. River flows quietly, blue heron spreads wings rising, Queen Anne slaves blooming. Crisp air hints at fall, otter flows and plays in reeds, excited dog barks. Forest animals, blend with fallen madrone leaves, once green moss turned brown. Deep red setting sun, solitary river walk, blue heron feeds its offspring. Mountains mirrored by the river at night, in meteor showers shimmering light. During this early pandemic, we had to deal with a lot of fires, and unfortunately, a lot of our friends lost homes, and it was very scary. This one is about fires. Prompt. The fires around us are vicious, unforgiving, scarring. When the devastation hits home, and friends watch their houses go up in flames, bereft of possessions. The only thing left are memories of what once was a life. When flames shoot sky high and whole forests are decimated and ashes dance in the firestorm, you ask yourself, what is essential as you prepare to leave at a moment's notice? You pack up your life into a few boxes knowing full well your heart will break should what's left behind become part of the fire. There's so much sorrow, so much loss. This heavy energy concentrates in the sepia-colored smoke that settles in and suffocates the valleys. Once beautiful trees, along with our lungs, are struggling for breath, for air, for clear skies, for survival. You are waiting for rain to wash away the layers of soot, of ashes, of tears and anger, to have a clean slate for a fresh start. Is emptiness a bandage that will heal the numbness? Will it help to protect against more assaults? Will it help to protect fire sour emotions? When is enough enough?
Thank you.
There is one more comforting poem. It's called A Hygge Recipe. We were supposed to write a poem on a recipe that we knew, and I couldn't come up with one, so here we go. December arrives, grayness settles in, shorter days with tea at 4. Turn on the water, fill the teapot with Chinese pu'er, steams rising visibly. Let it steep quietly. Take 2 biscuits from the Italian tin, put them on a porcelain plate. Place near the green wreath where the center white candle is aglow, casting shadows on the wall. Roses painted on the body of a porcelain cup, transparent against the candlelight. The tea seems to evaporate. With every sip, its fragrance lingers. I feel warm inside and out. With a fire in the wood stove, with a dog curled around my feet under the table, Danish comfort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beate. Thank you. Before I move on to the next part of the foreword, I'm going to read you Beate Foit's poet statement. At a time when life has almost returned to normal, it feels strange to reflect on my memories and feelings during the COVID-19 pandemic that began 16 months ago. Everything came to an abrupt halt in March 2020. The life to which we were accustomed ceased to exist. No choir or theater performances, no celebrations with family or friends, no human touch outside our homes. It felt surreal. We had to adjust to this new normal, weekly poems shared online instead of once a month in person. Here we could encourage each other through this dark period of time in our lives. We held the space for each other as we learned to live through the pandemic. Numb, angry, and sad, a world without shared laughter but frequent worries, a volatile political climate, severe wildfires killing people, decimating old-growth forests, and vibrant communities. Initially, we hoped to return to normal by last summer, yet rapidly increasing numbers of infected and dying people painted a grim picture. By September, we had accepted the fact that this pandemic would last well into the new year, and it did. Focusing on poetry helped me to describe my inner and outer world. At the end of April 2021, we each had 102 new poems from the past 13 months, or presumably. Some of us had missed a week or a day now and then, and our newest number had far fewer. Some of the poems were throwaways, but they were written. They answered the prompt. Some were gems, some were still unpolished, but were potential gems. Seth Kaplan's poet statement. I was not writing before the pandemic. I was busy. My busy was expressed in good deeds, hard work, building something. Good, lots of good. It was as if I was a perpetual motion train, building my own track to keep going. Pandemic didn't exactly change that. If anything, it created more fuel, more desire to do more. But as the months went by, friends from long past began to reach out. And one of those dear friends was poetry. We started by catching up, sharing family stories, memories. And soon, as we remembered ourselves and the trust we had earned through the years, we began to ask, but really, how are you? This pandemic has really been something. Is anything different? My pandemic poems can seem random. While I tried writing specifically about the pandemic, I never created anything I thought worth sharing. I realize now I wrote not of an event, but of a journey. The poems shared herein express my experiences from living through a time that changed us all in intimate ways from a distance.
Thank you, Jenna. Thanks to everybody for being here tonight. Excuse me. In the early days of the pandemic, I was really struck by how I felt about the physical distancing that was taking place. It took me a while to get used to that. But that space over time got filled with maybe a deeper emotional connection. And I started to notice that since everything was from a distance, those emotional connections, it didn't really matter whether the people were living or dead. And so these first two poems come from that place. The first one is called Memories of Good Times to Come. We would be friends, you and I, if not for the convenience of death. But what is death, if not the giving of oneself to something new, as in life unto death? And so today, on this anniversary of you no longer, I see you finally. Inconvenience is no matter. I come to this joining carrying my shame before me for my practice of social distancing long before we had those words. Your love was so much and I was so small. Let us walk together on this land you never knew, except in your dreams. Dream with me today, and you can call out the names of things as the wind caresses and soothes the ancestral wounds. Let us embrace across generations as brothers. Let me know there is redemption from the years of missing you. Mistaking gentleness for weakness. I miss you now. Let us walk together, you and I, and let us rename all those things we thought we knew. Let us rejoice in the memories of good times to come. The next poem is called Naming Stars. I do not know the names of the stars. I struggle with names generally. And naming stars can seem like naming grains of sand or snowflakes or heartbeats. But that is not it. I look to the stars and see mystery, and I do not seek a name. I did name a star once. My grandma Anna saw wonder in everything. A peasant daughter among siblings too many to track. She came to America as a teenager with her Zionist husband and created a new way, rejoicing in every challenge, ever hopeful. Her stories never ended with what is, but with what might yet be. And so, near the end of her life, I named a star for her. And when I shared the certificate showing her name and a personalized message from the star registry, her eyes opened big as the moon and wet as the dawn. I did not know such a thing was possible, she said, as she looked at me with wonder. There are more stars than we have numbers, and I know the name of one. Anna is up there amongst so many others, shedding her light over the world's darkness. This last poem comes from really over the last couple of years. I've been so struck with this combination of people feeling so strident and uncertain at the same time, that this combination can exist. And maybe this poem is about that. It's called There Is a Gate. There is a gate. The gate locks shut. The gate swings freely both ways. It is a gate, and it offers no clue to the shape of your soul. It is only you and only yours to decide if this gate is to guard or to step through. There is a gate. You stand on one side day after day and wonder, which side of the gate is this? Is it the side of the oppressed or the oppressor? Are you defending this gate or trying to break through? Should you open this gate graciously or hold it fast with the last breath of your life? There is a gate, and just now you hear voices, disembodied shouts and whispers, pleas to save the gate, to give your life to the gate. And there is silence, space, where you question the very existence of this gate. There is a gate, and there is a gate. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. By this time, the Applegate poets had been sharing their poems with each other for 6 years. In years past, we had had Valentine's Day readings at the Applegate Library, Christmas season readings at Pacifica Gardens. As poets, each of us had matured and deepened. In April of 2021, Aódagaín broached the idea that we create a book of poems by these 6 Applegate poets who had shared their poems with each other during the 13 months of the pandemic, plus Seth, who had joined us toward the end of that time. Lisa took over leadership of the project, offering publication through her company, Native Run Press. Thus, the book in your hands. Aódagaín. Oh, let me first read your poet's statement. Why write when the sky is falling? What to say when the end of the world seems imminent? How to form lines of a poem when a plague is rampaging, its reach extending to the ends of the earth? Can words ever be a salve to the losses of our family, our nation, our global community have suffered in this pandemic, the tragedy that we have endured? Though we as a group of poets didn't set out to answer that question, the task of showing up, putting pen to paper, and responding to the call gave voice to our silent tears, allowed space to grieve, and encouraged us to honor life in the midst of incomprehensible death. The following poems reveal the different moods the group's prompts elicited in me. From rage to rejoicing, from reflecting on the past to imagining the face of the future, from fighting despair to seeking beauty in the heart of a flower. In order to write poetry in this unprecedented time, I had to be still and notice, to be present to what was right in front of me, to understand that the only moment is now. My hope is that these poems will offer others a similar solace. Aódagaín.
Thank you so much, Jenna. And thank you for everyone for being here. It's a true honor to be speaking to you and to be sharing our poems. And it is a very deep honor to be part of the Applegate Poets. I felt that from the beginning and I still do. So as Jenna wrote or read from my statement, I really did feel like to get through the pandemic, I had to get still. And this first poem speaks to that. Walking the talk. Sometimes I want to do less and be more. I worry too much, too often. I fail to practice what I know, the answer to all dilemma. Breath in, breath out. A pandemic has struck, global in scope. The worst feared has become true. Nothing will be as before. But what hasn't changed? I am still here with these thoughts that only I can silence. Breath in, breath out. If there were no tomorrow, I'd start the day with a crystal flute of cold champagne. Sip it slowly as I watch the first light of morning wake from its dreaming. I'd turn on Vivaldi to full volume and aim it at the mountaintops, so the valley would be filled with music. I'd sit in the garden long enough to witness the first shoots emerging from the dark earth, the unfurling of a spinach leaf, the reaching of a pea tendril towards its trellis. My wild, wry, wicked friend, Liza, died last week. I sat at her feet, anticipating her last breath. Time ticked by on the bedside clock, but in that room, as she labored to be released, there was only breath in, breath out, until there wasn't. Can I permit myself to just sit for as long as necessary till I become only breath in, breath out, and the illusion of a finite life merges with the reality of the infinite? So one of the many things that happened during the pandemic for many of us is that we couldn't travel. We couldn't travel to the nearest city, much less somewhere much further. And so I think one of the prompts was write about a favorite place. So this is called Madrid. Color her warm, chestnut brown, the red of a Rioja spilling into my glass, smooth on my tongue. Color her salted, black, green, the olives of her southern climes, pungent flesh giving way to juicy pleasure. Color her soft, golden dusk edging the tree-lined courtyard. A bookseller talks of Lorca. I come away with leather-bound wonders. Color her mind-blowing, awe-inspiring, hours walking the halls of the Prado, Fra Angelico's haloed Annunciation, The Three Graces by Rubin, Bruegel's demonic fantasies, there for the viewing, there for the honoring. Returning late to the hostel, owner turned friend expresses his concern. You've been gone since early morning. I was worried. In a dream-like trance, I answer, I spent all day at the Prado. Oh yes, he nods. I understand. Color her sobering, stark, the black and white masterpiece, Guernica, Picasso's wall-length response to the horror of modern-day war. Color her open-hearted, sun-splashed, the smiles of the Madrileños, a people clear in their priorities. Afternoons spent at a cafe table, among family, friends, newcomers. Freedom in the present, having endured a dictatorial past. Color her deeply familiar, vaulted walkways, filigreed balconies of wrought iron lace, terracotta tiled roofs, flower draped gardens. Decadence and demise, in an ongoing dance. Like the city of my childhood, New Orleans, the only other city that ever stole my heart. An aha moment when history illuminates. I've returned to the motherland. I've come home. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So we have two more poets, and I can tell you right now we're going to run over the 6 o'clock time by probably about 10 minutes. But I'm going to do it tonight because we have two more poets. Penned Up is a product of the shared work of the Applegate poets and of Lisa Baldwin's editorial and production oversight. Here you will find Christin Weber's strong spiritual voice, as in Father, Mother, God, and Lisa Baldwin's laser-sharp, wicked, twinkle-in-the-eye language, as in What the World Needs Now is. Here you will find Joan Peterson dancing with her one-year-old great-grandson, learning to dance, using the rhythm of the Villanelle form to dance her images. Beate speaking for the river in an empathic shape-shifting, the Moldau. Seth expressing a complex relationship with his mother, you who fed me words I took as nourishment, in Untitled and Unfinished. Here you will find Aódagaín's fierce strength in seeing the political as personal, I am enraged, and my own poetry, about which another poet said, it can be quirky and irreverent, but lurking and leaking out of the lines is profound, in a profound sense of awe and respect. This is Joan Peterson's poet's statement. I moved through the pandemic with relative ease. My great-grandson was born on February 2020, and since his family and I share a household, I had plenty to keep me occupied during the year of isolation. However, I missed the contact with my poet friends and my singing friends. The month of April was Poetry Month, so some of us began the challenge of writing a poem a day and sending it out to others who are also writing daily poems. After taking a month off, we realized that the poetry exchange was an important part of having contact with friends. So we began a poem a week, exchanging prompts with suggestions of what to write. This went on throughout the year of 2020 and into 2021. It was a wonderful way of keeping in contact with my poet friends and getting to know each other in an even more intimate way. It also kept us writing, which was a perfect source of motivation. I am thankful for our poetry group and thankful that we were able to keep our poems growing through the year of isolation. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you, Jenna. And thank you for the audience who's out there. We're having such a great time sharing our poems with you. We're glad you all tuned in. My first poem is called Shelter in Place. It came from the top, this command to shelter in place, sounding so military, but I'm ready with shooting stars, buttercups, hound's tongue, Indian warrior. My bunker is a hollow tree near the pond. A varied thrush flies by, a banner in the sky, to say all is well here on the planet. No harm will come to the wild things. Our thoughts need healing. That was my first attempt at writing through the pandemic because it was a little bit dark at that point, and we were trying to kind of see our way through it. The next poem I'm going to read has a little more hope. We're looking for the future. So we're throwing a message into the ocean, a message in a bottle, and that's going to bring us some good news, we hope. Message in a bottle. You don't know me, and I don't know you, but we are both living on this great round ball called Earth. The year is 2020, the year of fear. We all wear masks over our faces to protect ourselves and those near us. The masks hide our smiles. As you read this, if we were sitting together on the sand, we wouldn't be able to recognize each other in case we met again someday. This is not our only fear. We have seen fires like we have never known ravage our small town. People have lost their homes, communities destroyed, the result of climate change. The world is heating up faster than we can adapt, much less prevent. Oceans are rising, glaciers are melting. I have hope that by the time you are reading this, we will have reached some kind of balance on this planet. Our government will no longer be run by a clown. Our masks will be removed, and we will smile at each other and maybe even hug. This letter is for you from Joan Peterson, autumn 2020. And then as Jenna, when she read my statement, she talked about my great-grandson being born right at the time of the beginning of the pandemic. And so I never really felt isolated. I had this wonderful little boy growing up before my eyes, and it was just a joy to be with him. So this is a Villanelle, which has kind of a dancing rhythm, and it has 2 repeating lines, and has a repeating rhyme too. So learning to dance. He reaches out his arms. He wants to dance. He takes my hand. We spin around the room. He's only 1 year old and full of grace. We try a waltz, a 2-step, a new pace. Any song will fill our one desire. He holds on to my arms. He wants to dance. When music starts to play, we take a chance. We even feel the rhythm in our feet. He's only 1 year old and full of grace. We try a little spin for an advance across the room, and off we twirl. He reaches out his arms. He loves to dance. This brings back thoughts of early days when boys were shy and girls afraid. He's only 1 year old and full of grace. In later years, when time has raced ahead, what memories will he have of reaching out his arms when we would dance, when he was 1 year old and full of grace? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan. Some poems in this book are intensely personal. Some are spiritual, some humorous, some political, some thought-provoking or challenging. The poems are varied, as are the backgrounds of the poets, but we all have a love of poetry and a love of our home in the beautiful Applegate region of Southern Oregon. All of the poems come from an interior depth, the spiritual, psychological, and creative footing each one of us found during the pandemic by penning poetry and sharing it with each other. Signed by Diana Coogle, Applegate, Oregon. And our final poet of the evening is Christin Weber. Christin Lore Weber, here is her poet's statement. As I lived through the year of pandemic solitude, writing poetry with the Applegate poets, I realized that many prompts called forth memories from my young adult years as a Catholic nun. Not surprisingly, the skills I needed to live through this present time had been imparted to me by the style of life and teaching of that ancient monastic way: silence, order, focus on the moment at hand, meditation, nature as a communication of divine life and light, prayer alternating with work, study, respect for and contemplation of whatever presents itself, gratitude for simple things, compassion for those who suffer. As I watched what seemed a world coming apart, I found the writing of poetry to be a participation with all those whose lives were devoted to putting that world back together in a new and creative way. Through poetry, it was possible to see through the present disintegration, gather the fragments, and reformulate them. I felt grateful for every poem, for each poet, and for the work that brought us through. Welcome, Christin.
One day during the early years of the first year, of the pandemic. I was sitting in my backyard, and the chimes, the wind chimes were blowing, and all of a sudden I felt like I was three places at once. I was there in the backyard with the wind chimes, and I was on a rock above the ocean off of the Dingle Peninsula in Ireland at Slayhead. And I was also in the backyard of the convent where I spent I spent 14 years. This poem is in answer to the prompt for silence. The silence at Slayhead. Clouds on this day between the times float above the Applegate, soft, closing over us like sleep, while winds of yesterday speak low through backyard chimes, less sound than a deeper stillness. From a great, long time ago, the day as gray as sea foam swirling on the rocks at Slayhead, where ghosts still pray, as mystic silence swept all thought away. While I sat quiet there upon a rock where purple heather bloomed, ocean winds lifted from a distant past, the God-crazed hermit's sinuous theophany of song. I heard it echo off the shore of their now empty beehive huts on the Skellig Islands, there to lose themselves to pray. Oh, it wraps me still in silence, silver gray, a flow that follows words and frees the human soul to be attuned for an awareness far more whole than any sound on earth could possibly convey. The next poem is called Home, and it seems like a place that I've been searching for all my life. And one day I was nervous. I was in California at the time, and I was nervous that when I tried to go home from my friend's house, which was like 2 suburbs away, I wouldn't find my way. I would get lost. And my friend said to me, "No," she said, "you can never get lost because your home is you." That came back to me during the pandemic. 6 degrees from home, she wandered, at least that, not counting dreams, in her search for the very thing she wandered from, where she might fit each floor plan, making proper use of every room. In dreams, the dwelling places multiplied, surprising her with spaces she discovered on the other side of tunnels made of stone that opened out into a great hotel, a boarding house, a place to stay a while, but not a home. As years, cities, countrysides, and the eyes of strangers and of friends opened to receive her and whatever she could bring, as her heart also opened wider to her wondering, to her deepening, to her yearning for essential paradox in the vision she contained, each further step required her to drop some perfect memory of all she sought, an image she'd been treasuring. How then would she know it when she finally arrived? What if she'd let go of the unique, the necessary bit of its identity, the space in which she fit? She could no longer calculate the distance she had come, the loves holding, lifting, changing her, those she had lost. At evening, she rested on a great dark stone beside the road. She put down everything alone and filled with endless space, the name of which she could not place, although she knew the feel of it, the sense, almost the voice of something, now so near that distance was erased. There could be no other place than in herself to find that home, that grace to live, to be, to roam. Sometime after I left the convent, I had a dream of a little old nun, Sister Angelique, and she was in heaven. And heaven was this place of light and like a beautiful stage or a cathedral made of clouds. And Sister Angelique, who had died, I think at something like 86 or something like that, was dancing. The name of this poem, and by the prompt that Joan talked about, dance, this is the poem I wrote for that prompt. Tall, elegant, and old, you reached out your slender hand to choose me. Did I know you? A trace of others over lifetimes flashed across your face, in the angles of your stance, just so. How could I not know? You seemed to fold your body with familiar grace like my mother's mother, when she turned in sunlight from her gardening to place her hand upon my arm, as you did in that empty space, that trance, a dream of music not yet played. We prayed that dance, your old feet and mine, together, in and out, like breath, the folding of the universe upon itself, like love and death. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Wow.
We really appreciate it. I hope you loved everybody as much as I do.
We loved it. Everybody gather together there so we can see you all together. Since you couldn't be together at the time you were writing, now you're all together.
Beate, come in front of me.
Right. There you go. All right, now we get Joan.
There
And
we
Lisa.
go. And
There we are.
Lisa,
There we
there.
go.
Thank you all so much for coming. The beautiful chat in the window says, loved it, exquisite poetry, and thank you all. It was wonderful. So you have some appreciative audience out there. Thank you all so much for coming. Everybody out
Thank
there
you.
and all of
Thank
our
you,
poets.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night. See you next
Good
time.
night.